under the slogan of shaping our digital future. The Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, the CDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCO, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.
Marhaba and hello everyone. Welcome to the second session of the Innovative Connectivity or Community Solutions with a focus on the MENA region, organized by the Internet Society as part of the DCDF 21. We are honored for having great panelists and speakers today, and we will begin with a welcoming note from Engineer Khalid Wali, Director of ICT Department at the Arab League. Mr. Wali.
First of all, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Mrs. Lemay Saadani for the Vice Regional Director for ISOT in the Arab region and in participating in this valuable event. And I will switch into Arabic actually. أعتقد أن يعني العالم شهد ظروف عصيبة وتحديات جامة على مدار الأشهر الماضية عقب ظهور جائحة كورونا، مما شكل منحنى جديدا لخريطة المعاملات الإنسانية لتصبح التكنولوجيا هي حجر الزاوية في إدارة الأعمال. وقد أظهرت آثار جلية على تزايد اهتمام المواطنين نحو اللجوء إلى المعاملات الإلكترونية، وبالتالي ارتفاع نسب استخدام الخدمات الرقمية والحصول على الخدمات الحكومية والمالية عن طريق الإنترنت. طبعا احنا كجامعة عربية أو إدارة اتصالات بنحاول إن نتجه في جميع المجالات الحقيقة. احنا بنحاول دلوقتي نفعل الاستراتيجية العربية للأمن السيبراني، بنحاول نضع استراتيجية موحدة للذكاء الاصطناعي. كل دول هيبقوا طبعا مخرجاتهم هتبقى تنصب في الاستراتيجيه العربيه للاتصالات والمعلومات التي نامل من الانتهاء منها في النصف الاول من العام القادم. الحقيقه برضو اقدر اقول ان نجاح دولنا العربيه في التحول الى التنميه الرقميه يحتاج الى تفعيل الاستراتيجيه العربيه للاتصالات والمعلومات، وكذلك الاستراتيجيه العربيه للاقتصاد الرقمي من اجل دفع بعجل التنميه الاقتصاديه والاجتماعيه والحد من خطر الفجوه الرقميه بين الدول المتقدمه والدول الناميه. فقد اشارت تقارير الامم المتحده الى خطوره اتساع هذه الفجوه التي سينتج عنها تهميش الدول غير المعلوماتيه واقتصادها من الاقتصاد العالمي. وكان في احدى برضو التوصيات التي نتج عنها اخر اجتماع او اللي هنعرضها برضو على في الاجتماع القادم للجنه الدائمه العربيه للاتصالات، هتبقى الاسبوع القادم، يليها المكتب التنفيذي مجلس الوزراء، ثم مجلس الوزراء الاتصالات، مجلس الوزراء العربي للاتصالات والمعلومات. التوصيات دي يعني هي طبيعيه جدا، ولكن احنا نلاقي تقارير كتير جدا اتعملت في الفتره الاخيره بتشير الى اهميه تطوير البنيه التحتيه في الدول العربيه الخاصه بالانترنت طبعا. فعلى سبيل المثال احدى التوصيات تقديم المساعدات للبلدان التي لها ظروف خاصه من حيث تطوير البنيه التحتيه للاتصالات قدر الامكان تعزيز دور الاتصالات في حالات الاستغاثة والطوارئ، زيادة ساعات الإنترنت لتمكين الجميع من استخدام الخدمات الرقمية بيسر وسهولة، اغتنام هذه الفرصة للعمل على محو الأمية الرقمية لدى البلدان العربية، خفض تكلفة استخدام الاتصالات والإنترنت، الاهتمام والتحديث المستمر للمحتوى الرقمي مع الحفاظ على الملكية الفكرية، الطلب من الدول العربية كافة موافاتنا بخطتها التحول الرقمي وتعميم التجارب الناجحة على الدول للاستفادة منها، التشجيع والحث على استخدام الذكاء الاصطناعي، أيضا تطوير التعليم عن بعد، وأخيرا الاهتمام باستخدام الذكاء ودمج الذكاء الاصطناعي بشكل أفضل في جميع مجالات الحياة. دي كانت إحدى التوصيات أو دي كانت مداخلتي الحقيقة لهذا الحدث الجليل، و I'm looking forward to hoping for this event all the success and looking forward to cooperating with you once again in the near future. Thank you and hope you a successful event.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valley, on the kind words, and we hope that the recommendations of this session would find its way into the Arab League recommendation, as we believe that allowing an enabling environment for community networks and complementary access solutions would benefit communities in the region in getting better access, and is part of developing the infrastructure, as you mentioned. I would like to remind our attendees that interpretation is available. You can choose if you want to listen to my voice in English and panelists, or switch to French or Arabic. And please ask any question at any time through the Q&A facility via Zoom. Now we will go to a message from Dr. Martha Suarez, the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance. Dr. Suarez has over 15 years of experience in telecommunication industry. In her current role at DSA, she advocates for laws and regulations that will lead to more efficient and effective spectrum utilization. This is essential to addressing keyword social and economic challenges. And we believe that this is very relevant to our session. Can you play the video, please?
Hi, my name is Marta Suarez. I am the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, DSA, and I would like to thank the Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, the International Telecommunications Union, and Internet Society for inviting me to speak today. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. And today I'm going to speak about spectrum-related issues that enable connectivity in Middle East and North Africa region. And I'm going to focus on the importance of the 6 gigahertz band for connectivity in the region. So if we move to the next slide, I already mentioned my name, and I would really encourage you to follow us, the DSA, myself, and Twitter and social media accounts. And for those of you that are not familiar with the DSA, we are a global non-for-profit cross-industry organization. And we basically advocate for best practices that will lead to more digital inclusion and foster innovation. And those best practices are related to spectrum management. So we think that it's important to have a good balance between license, unlicensed, and spectrum access spectrum, and also on having models that enable more connectivity and flexible frameworks. So let's start now talking about the importance of Wi-Fi. So in general terms, Wi-Fi is essential to broadband. We have, if we see the numbers that come from Cisco VNI, we can notice that Wi-Fi is the primary method by which people access the internet. And globally, 51% of all IP traffic goes over Wi-Fi, will go over by Wi-Fi by 2022. So if you can see in this graph, you can see that part of the mobile of the traffic is going through mobile devices, but also it's going through Wi-Fi exclusive devices. So it is important to consider how this technology enables more connectivity, more broadband connectivity. And not only for fixed networks, but as I mentioned, also for mobile networks. In the case also of the Cisco VNI, we are able to see that even when we are evolving from 2G, 3G to 4G and 5G, the Wi-Fi, the traffic that is offload to Wi-Fi networks is growing and will keep growing. So in the case of 5G, estimations are that 71% of the traffic will be offload to Wi-Fi networks. So taking into account the growing in the demand, Wi-Fi will also be very important and keeps being very important for connectivity. DSA has published a white paper that I won't be able to cover in this keynote completely. So I encourage you to read it and to see the reference of why the 6 gigahertz band is important for broadband access and why we need it for Wi-Fi. But let me take two important aspects. One is that the current use of the networks keeps growing. Now with the COVID-19 situation, we have seen that more people were working from home. We are working, students are following their classes from home. There is more electronic commerce. And basically now access to the internet means digital inclusion. And that traffic is growing, not only because of the pandemic, but also in a general way. This study that we did with a company named Asia, you can also find it on the DSA website, shows that the Wi-Fi traffic in North America, in the United States and Canada, and in Europe is basically doubling every 3 years. So we are seeing on one side that growing and that appetite for more traffic and more spectrum. And on the other side, we are also seeing new applications and new requirements. So from the technology perspective, Wi-Fi has been evolving. And now we have the new generation of Wi-Fi that is Wi-Fi 6E. So it's the latest generation that operates in the 6 gigahertz band. And it provides many advantages like gigabit speeds, wider channels, extremely low latency, high capacity, more connected devices, and more efficiency in terms of energy consumption. So all those parameters are really important for new applications. So it's not only about attending the growing demand, but also enabling new applications and new use cases. So for example, let's cover quickly the main 3 use cases that we expect to see with unlicensed access or license-exempt access to the 6 gigahertz band. One is for very low power devices, like when you imagine augmented and virtual reality applications, you will have devices that will connect between them, like glasses, for example, to a mobile phone or glasses to a server at home. So those will be using unlicensed spectrum. Also more connectivity at fixed locations, like, for example, low power indoor applications. So consumption of traffic at the companies, by industries, but also at home and carrying out that taking that traffic at home. And then we have a third type of use case that is standard power applications. That is very important for connectivity in hard to reach areas because it can extend the last mile of broadband access using license-exempt spectrum. One of the key aspects of Wi-Fi is that it's possible to have global and massive economies of scale. And that is the case in the frequencies that we currently use for Wi-Fi, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. But that is also the case in the 6 gigahertz band. So you can see here, there are more and more devices that are being designed and have been certified by the Wi-Fi Alliance as Wi-Fi interoperable, but also by different certification institutions. And those devices then can operate and are already in the market. So the decision of opening the 6 gigahertz band for license-exempt access will have immediate benefits because the devices are already available. So it will really accelerate the connectivity and the use of the spectrum. Now let's see what is the situation globally in terms of the license exempt access to the 6 gigahertz band. And we see that there is a powerful global momentum. We have different regions that are working. In the case of the Americas, there are now 8 administrations that have decided to open the entire band. And those are the US, Canada, Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, Brazil, Peru, and Chile. And we are expecting final decisions because they already had the consultations in Mexico, Colombia, and Argentina. So just for the Americas, we have more than 80% of the market of devices that is already created for the 6 gigahertz band. So that gives a really good perspective in terms of economies of scale. And then we have in region 1, so ITU region 1, in Europe, we had a final decision from the European Union to open 480 megahertz of a spectrum in the 6 gigahertz band for license exempt access. And recently at the last ECC plenary, it was decided to have a new work item to study the upper part of the band, so to start coexistence studies in the upper part of the band from 6425 to 7125 megahertz. If we focus now in the Middle East and north part of Africa, we have had very important decisions. The first one was from for the entire band. We have Saudi Arabia that decided to enable access to 1200 megahertz of a spectrum. We also had decision from UAE and Morocco to open the lower part of the band. And we have seen some consultations for the entire or for parts of the band in countries like Tunisia, Egypt, Oman, and Qatar. So it really gives a very good momentum, as I was explaining. And in Asia Pacific, we had the final decision from the Republic of Korea to open the entire band. And then we had also some consultations and studies in different geographies. So that is what's currently going on. I would like to close my presentation saying what regulators are saying about this band. In the case of the US, I would go very quickly on these comments, but in the case of the US, they recognize that there is a critical need for providing additional spectrum resources for unlicensed operations. And that's why they have opened the band, because it has for 160 megahertz channels, as well as 320 megahertz channels in the future with the Wi-Fi 7 technologies. ISET also highlighted the importance of giving immediate access to the full potential of the 6 gigahertz band for airline technologies. And they also recognize that it will increase the possibilities of cost-effective enhanced broadband connectivity in rural and remote areas. In the case of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, they also mentioned how important this additional spectrum is to attend the needs of final users, and also the fact that the citizens can take advantage of the technology from 2021. Finally, in the case of Anatel in Brazil, they also recognize that there is a cost of opportunity if actions are not taken. So they decided that they wouldn't like, they understood that they could wait until 2024 or 2027. However, they decide that the right moment to open the band was right now, because there is an ecosystem for Wi-Fi 6E. So, so I think those are important comments, and probably also to refer to the comments from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. It was mentioned that license exempt bases can also only for Wi-Fi technologies, but also for 5G new radio unlicensed technologies. So that is also important. So I would like to close my keynote here, and also as an open message for the next panel. The time to act is now. Decisions on spectrum management have a huge impact, not only on the economies of the countries in terms of receiving incomes from auctions and giving the spectrum to some particular stakeholders, but there is a huge economic benefit for society when you have license exempt access, because it will have an impact on the GDP of the countries, on the national growth, and also basically allowing more people to access broadband. It really creates a very good and positive circle of growth. So I think the time to act is now. If you would like to see more information, I also encourage you to visit our website. And thank you again to the organizers, and please continue enjoying this event. Thank you. Bye-bye.
We extend our thank you as well to Dr. Suarez for her great insights on how it's happening when it comes to spectrum around the world and in the region. And it is indeed heartwarming to see that the regulators in the region are up to date when it comes to regulations and are turning into allowing more and more access and use of spectrum, realizing the needs that COVID-19 and the development in usage in general is pushing towards. And we hope to see the countries that are still in the consultation process, Egypt, Tunisia, and Oman, to go with the general direction and general trend of allowing unlicensed access to the 6 gigahertz spectrum. Now we turn to João Aguiar for a short speech on what are we expecting. João is the Community Networks 2022 project lead at the Internet Society. He is the Communications and Outreach Manager for Latin America as well. He has master's degree in global governance, focusing on internet growth in Latin America and innovative connectivity solutions. Handing to you, João.
Thank you, Hannah. Quick question, can you see the slides already?
Yes.
All right, perfect, thank you. So thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jonas, as Hannah has mentioned, and today I will share with you an example of an innovative connectivity solution that is tackling one of the biggest challenges of our time. This challenge is what we're calling the connectivity challenge. So COVID showed us that the internet is necessary for us to carry our various tasks. So imagine living through the pandemic without having internet connectivity. However, as we know, more than a third of the world's population still live without it, according to recent data from the International Telecommunications Union. And that's almost 3 billion people that are losing life-changing opportunities each day because they're not connected. At the same time, even with that huge disparity and the need to grow the internet, we see that the rate of people coming online is also slowing down. And this shows us that our current model of providing internet service has worked greatly. After all, it connected the nearly 2/3 of the world so far, but it needs to be complemented by others. The people that are being left behind now are the ones living in areas where current business models are not profitable, such as rural and isolated areas or places with lower incomes. And there's also the fact that growing the internet is key to building an inclusive digital economy. So if we don't take action now with it, we face the risk of the current digital divide deepening several other divides, such as the economic one, for instance. But innovative connectivity solutions have been tackling these challenges for years, enabling communities with the resources they need to get connected. And one of these innovative connectivity solutions are community networks, which you probably heard about on the first session, but I want to go quickly about it just to give a brief introduction. So community networks are networks built by and for the communities they serve. In a very practical sense, they are when a community comes together and builds local infrastructure that then connects to a backhaul link to the rest of the internet. They are complementary in the sense that they reach areas that complement the work of traditional telecommunications operators. And many times they partner with these operators who work together on connecting the network to a backhaul link, for instance. A key part of building these networks are local champions, which means people in the community who take the lead to develop and maintain those networks and make a difference in their community. Local champions, they don't need to be highly technically trained, but they are usually creators of the community. And also, community networks relies on partnerships. So partnerships that can be with nonprofits, local businesses, local governments or regional governments, regional organizations, and a number of other players. This is a quick overview that community networks can have different sizes, setups, purposes, as well as different governance models. And to exist, no matter how many different models they have, they do face several challenges. That is something that I want to highlight here. Some of the challenges are those that I want to show here, but to go over them quickly, the financial support challenge is because communities need to have the resources they need to start a community network. There is a competition challenge because sometimes, as we mentioned, they may be seen as competing with service providers, when in truth, they are actually valued partners and a way to complement with their solutions. There's a technical knowledge challenge because even as building a CN doesn't require expert level technical knowledge, it does require some, and people need to develop those skills to be able to do so. There's the cost for equipment and backhaul because they may be too great and add on to the financial support aspect that we discussed earlier. There's the sustainability issues because these networks need to maintain financial sustainability to be able to keep people online in the long run. Electricity, in some places, the challenges are prior to telecommunications infrastructure and include electricity shortages that prevent people from building and using community networks, which is sometimes even managed by generating power locally and other resources. We have the universal services and licenses and spectrum challenges because, well, working with governments and regulators to make sure that CNs are able to operate under the necessary licenses, access the necessary spectrum bands, as Marta just mentioned, for instance, with Wi-Fi 6, or even use universal service funds for financing may be challenging for them. Scaling, because growing the community network sometimes becomes necessary, but it's also something that feeds from the many challenges that we mentioned before. And finally, at the center of it all lies the bigger one, not bigger one, but a big one, which is the lack of local champions in the community to bring the change forward. So this is why we say that the pillars for building community networks are policy and regulatory pillars, the pillar of policy and regulatory issues, because a favorable policy environment can help in making it simple for communities to start and run their network in the long run. The backhaul is another pillar because, while communities need access to fiber or a favorable ISP that is willing to work with them to provide backhaul to their network, knowledge and know-how, because as we mentioned, communities need to understand and know how to build and develop and maintain the network. We need a critical mass of users to be able to maintain the network as well, because, well, people will benefit from the internet, but the network is only existing for the people that it's being served. So people need to be there to use it. And sustainability is also a key challenge and a key thing to maintain the network running, because, well, people need to be financially sustainable without depending on external help or funding to be able to serve the community they want. This is why I want to share with you how the Internet Society works in the deployment, in supporting deployments and development of community networks globally. We work in 4 stages mostly. So we start with the engagement stage. In the engagement stage, we reach out to local partners, local communities that are interested in building community networks to understand a bit more about their needs and how we are able to support them. We have the policy stage, because when we're starting to work with a community network, we need to understand if the local policy environment is favorable, or if there are restrictions that impede CNs from existing. And if so, we can work with local partners and local governments and government agencies to make sure that it is a favorable environment and that people are able to build the community networks. We support communities and local organizations with training to make sure that they develop the necessary skills and technical knowledge to be able to develop and apply their knowledge in developing community networks. And finally, we support with the deployment in many ways. It can be financial support to kickstarting the process, connecting people with organizations that can donate equipment, for instance, or even guide them through the deployment process with our expertise and connecting them to other communities that have faced similar issues. These are some of the places that we have worked with community networks. As we mentioned, these are some, not all of them. We have supported CNs all over the world, from Kyrgyzstan and Georgia, which my colleague Max Stucci can talk more about shortly, to Brazil, where I'm based right now, although it's not on the map still. But well, we have been working with several community networks around the world, and we plan to keep on supporting CNs. So I want to share with you that for 2022, we will still be supporting CNs globally. We will support 10 existing and new CNs. On the training side, we will keep updating an existing course for people to learn how to deploy a community network. And we are also publishing a new resource, which is the CN Handbook, that will support regional and local organizations in Africa in assessing the readiness to deploy a community network. This resource will then be developed as a training course as well in 2022 that will support everyone globally. And finally, we keep engaging with partners and governments to support the development of policies and regulations that are enabling community networks globally. Before I close this, I want to share with you a quick example of what a community network deployment looks like and what it is able to achieve. So I would like to share the story of a CN we work with in Murambinda, Zimbabwe. So almost 300 kilometers from Harare, which is the capital city of Zimbabwe, there is Murambinda, a small town that for a long time relied on agriculture and trade for its subsistence. In 2001, Joseph Pishi, who was a local entrepreneur that brought dial-up connectivity to this community when he developed the cyber cafe. He called it Vision Internet, and it was housed in an old shipping container, the one you see on the picture here. He brought dial-up connectivity to the community, and over time, people started using the internet little by little. In 2016, Joseph joined a pioneering team in the discussions of the community network summits in Africa, where people meet every year still today to discuss the latest challenges and opportunities on community networks. And Joseph gained further insights on how to deploy community networks. By 2019, Murambinda had its own community network, and he was able to expand it to cover even a 40-kilometer radius connecting 80 schools in the region. By 2020, they were able to partner with a local internet service provider, Tel1, and they got access to their fiber backbone that supported the connectivity, improved their connectivity to the rest of the internet. At the time, also, there were no licenses for community networks in Zimbabwe still. So they applied to POTRAS, their local regulator, and were allowed to run a pilot network. So this pilot was later accepted, endorsed, and even used as a reference by POTRAS to change regulations in the country to provide a more friendly environment for community networks in Zimbabwe. And now they are able to use the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequencies to be able to address connectivity challenges through Wi-Fi to many other communities in the country. Their improved connectivity also supported local healthcare, with their hospital now being one of the best in the country, partly thanks to access to research technology. And all of this also supported the community when the pandemic hit. To partially sustain itself today, Murambinda works generate revenue by providing ICT-related services, such as using the cyber cafe's facilities and equipment for internet access for people who don't have their own equipment, photocopying, binding, training for government agencies on ICT matters, and also computer repairs and maintenance. The key thing I want to highlight here is that this was possible through a joint effort between a local entrepreneur, government bodies, the private and non-profit sectors, and many of the local champions that we mentioned. As you see, those many parts of the partnerships necessary to build a community networks are very common in successful community network stories. And I wanted to share this story with you because it shows that when we are working together and when we are trying things out and innovative connectivity solutions, we are able to connect communities and make a difference in closing the digital divide. So I would like to thank you all and hand it back to Hannah.
Thank you very much, Joel, for pinpointing some of the challenges that we may expect when working with community networks, as well as a very inspiring story that we can also use as base to work with other networks. And thank you for for highlighting the need for engagement and cooperation between regulatory bodies and the communities, as well as organizations like the Internet Society that enable or that help communities in bypassing some of the challenges that they may face. Now, building on what we have heard from Mr. Khaled Wali and Dr. Suarez and Juan Aguiar, we moved to a panel, and we are lucky to have representatives from the private sector who are very active when it comes to connectivity and communication. We have Dr. Guillaume Lepron from the Global Connectivity Policy team at Meta. He has been an active member of the Spectrum community for more than 15 years, working for some of the, I would say, household names in communication: Orange, Qualcomm, Airbus, and now Facebook or Meta. Guillaume contributed to key international spectrum projects, such as the opening of the 6 GHz band that Dr. Suarez mentioned, and the regulatory framework for 5G. Guillaume is also a member of the Global Connectivity Policy team at Facebook, where he's working on several spectrum initiatives to improve connectivity. Raising spectrum efficiency and availability is at the core of Guillaume's mission. Guillaume holds an engineering degree from ENST, Paris, France, and a PhD in telecommunications from Victoria University, Melbourne, Australia. We are also proud to have Max Stucci, who is a founder of an internet service provider in the north of Italy and one of the first wireless ISPs in the country. After that, Max joined the RIPE NCC as a trainer at the beginning, and then as the IPv6 program manager. Later on, he joined ISOC around 2.5 years ago as technical expert for the European region and has been the community network project lead for the last 2 years. We also have Joao to continue with us on the panel as well. Thank you everyone for joining us for this panel. Let me begin by some reflections that you have on what we have heard so far in this session. I'll start with Dr. Lepron.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thanks to the organizer. Yeah, just wanted to rebound on the story shared by Joao and how powerful community network can be. This is really the story of communities that are not connected because the generic framework taken at state level or national level does not reach out to this community, and giving them the power to take the connectivity in their hands and provide for themselves the right tools and find the right solution is really important to bridge this connectivity gap. It's just really inspiring. It's something that we see happening all around the world, and it's really something that can really change their life. And it's through the kind of technologies that Dr. Suarez was mentioning with Wi-Fi 6E, but other technology that really this community can build their own access to the internet and start benefiting from all the benefit that we know about being connected, being online, and increase their economic outlook.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lepron. We move now to Max Stucci. I know that you have been involved in some of the projects mentioned by Joao. What are your reflections there?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Well, there is a lot to say here because you could see the big example from Murambinda. We have a great example in Georgia. We could share as well where the community network started at one point and now they are fully self-sufficient. We have plenty of great examples all over the world where regulation has allowed community networks to be created. We can see great examples of someone taking the lead, Morambinda, there's Joseph Bishi. In Georgia, we have a very well-known name that's Ucha Seturi. People taking the lead and creating community networks, and that's a great example we can see all over. That's a series of examples we can see all over. It always requires a lot of work. It always requires a lot of knowledge, team building, finding the right partners, the right tools, the right devices. But then we see that this always helps in improving the conditions of the people who connected through these means. We have stories. One of them, Joao was showing it a moment ago. From Morambinda, we have stories from Georgia, we have stories from South America, where we see that this has really meant change for the lives of many people. And as Internet Society, we're always happy to see that we could help people enhance the situation for their community in their own country. And we don't have yet, but we're working also to get more data about how this is affecting the lives, positively, the lives of people. So we don't have much to show yet in terms of numbers, but we can show a lot of these stories. And this is always something that I say it's easy for us to use as material. I have a problem where my friends or parents, they ask me, what do you actually do for a living? Because they can't understand technology too much. But showing them these stories have let them understand that there is something behind me just typing something at the computer. And there is a way where we can help people improve their lives as well. And this comes through a chain of changes that we need to implement across different levels in the world and on a technical level.
Thank you very much, Max. Well, I will not ask you about your reflection about what you said, but I will use this opportunity to ask about. Well, you mentioned several challenges that face establishment of community networks and adoption of community networks. In your opinion, what is the one challenge that we can address as a group within a platform like DCDF, where we have access to decision makers that would play a role in enabling community networks in the region?
I would say, and I would put on the same level, so I always say that for a community network to be successful, it needs tough leadership. What we inside ISOC, in a small circle of organizations, we call the champions, the people who decide to step up. But they wouldn't be able to do anything if it wasn't for the regulation to be there and then for funding to be available. Because we have seen in our capacity at Internet Society that with small funding, a lot can be achieved. People always think that our projects are big and require a lot of funding, but that's not true. With very tiny amounts of funding, a lot can be achieved together with the champions, with the local communities. So I would say regulation is one field, but finding the right champions and helping them with a little bit of funding and a little bit of guidance, I think that's the key for making community networks more successful.
Yes. And just to add to Max's point, I think I completely agree with him. As a decision maker, I think regulations are part of it. And while Dr. Marta Suarez shared very interesting changes that are enabling community networks globally, but regulations and policies together are something that might even help. So for instance, the funding aspect that Max just mentioned, there are new countries trying out how to expand universal service funds to support community networks, and that may be a way that is able to scale community networks in their countries and then globally. The changes in spectrum regulations are also enabling. So in general, we have recommendations and we have reports that can showcase the several areas where policies and recommendations are able to enable community networks, and enabling them as we remove those initial barriers that they have to exist, and we support the necessary conditions for them to thrive. So funding, being able to use radioelectric spectrum as they require, and being able to participate in the national or in international ecosystem of telecommunications and being represented there will help community networks to be able to exist, and then will help them to scale and start solving the connectivity challenges that we just saw.
Yeah, and rebounding on what Joe just said in terms of scaling and really getting access to economies of scale, because that's what it's all about if you want to have lower price of equipment. Sometimes the regulation, even if they are thought for community networks just at national level, there's obviously a huge benefit if different countries in the region can discuss together, find out best practices and align the practices for community network across a region, so that it's clear for everyone, and then everyone is using the same equipment or similar equipment, and then everybody's benefiting from this kind of economies of scale. So having this kind of platform used for dialogue to ensure harmonization of community networks, regulation, rules, type of technology can be very helpful and very supportive.
Thank you very much. And building on that, Guillermo, so to achieve economies of scale, we need more people buying more devices. But at the moment, Wi-Fi 6E devices are not cheap. And many community networks, as Max and Juan mentioned, face issues that are related to funding. So they would probably go to cheaper and wider available options. Is there anything that can be done towards that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of technology introduction in the market. As we've seen in the slide from Dr. Suarez, the decisions on the 6 gigahertz band, they just from last December for the UAE, or for, I think it was March this year in Saudi Arabia. Tunisia did this consultation over the summer. So we're really talking about extremely recent decision. But when you look at the prospect over the next 2 to 3 years, this technology is going to become mainstream, and then it's going to be the same price as the usual Wi-Fi devices. So absolutely, it's not the role of community networks to drive this kind of technology innovation. What will happen is that we expect that Wi-Fi 6E is going to be taken on board in the city center, in places where you already have fiber and these kind of things. And then community networks will be able to leverage the same kind of technology at a much reduced price. So once again, it's about allowing these community networks through a differentiated network regulation, but not so differentiated that they can't use the same equipment. So they have to benefit from the same kind of economy of scale that are driven by the big MNOs, by the big ISPs, but with a slightly different regulation, because they have different constraints when you talk about extremely remote areas.
That's good to hear, and I truly hope that we reach the economies of scale very quickly when it comes to these devices. From your position at Meta, Guillermo, we know that Facebook and now Meta is interested in reaching more and more people. We have seen that with initiatives like Internet.org and other initiatives. Do you think that we can expect such or similar initiatives to take place where Meta works with communities on building networks rather than working with operators?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're very interested in community networks. We see it as probably the main tool to reduce the digital divide and make sure that the people that are unconnected will become connected. There are several ways that we hope we can help. The first one is we're members of something called the Telecom Infrastructure Project. And the goal of that is really to reduce the price of telecom equipment and make it more interoperable. And the benefits of that is that instead of a small community having to speak to an Ericsson and a Nokia, sometime with requests that are very small scales and maybe not matching so well, they are able to go to an open community where they will find technology which is more like open source and will give them the same kind of performance and a lot of interoperability, so they're not locked with one entity or another. So that's one aspect in where we're trying to help with the support of plenty of companies. So the Telecom Infrastructure Project is something that community networks leaders should look into to see where they can find cheaper and interoperable equipment. And the second aspect is, of course, partnership. And it's really something, I think Joao already stressed it. I want to stress it too. It's absolutely critical for this kind of network to work in partnership. For that, we're trying to develop tools and support, for example, for network planning of Wi-Fi network or other networks, solution like Terragraph. But it's not going to be us being the lead, because what it takes for a community network to be successful, as Max mentioned, is really strong leadership from the community, and it has to be the community taking ownership of that. So what we're trying to develop is tools to make it easier to deploy, help this community to deploy, but it's still going to be the community deploying it and finding the right partnership. It's probably one OEM, one vendor, the local community, and people deploying, so that these networks are really alive and coming from the community for the community.
That's a very, very, very good point. I want to now throw a question on the table for all the panelists to see or to discuss. What is the shape of different partnerships that we need to truly enable community networks that include local ISPs and service providers?
So, let me take this, at least at the beginning, because Joao had a slide on his presentation that showed like the different components, and I'm, as the author of that slide initially, I can take ownership of that a little bit. You need a mix. You need, as you mentioned, the local ISP. You need someone that's able to bring the connectivity, like the backhaul. Things here are getting probably a little simpler with the help of new medias. I would mention LEOs, low Earth orbit satellites, which could provide backhaul in areas where it was more challenging to bring it before. Then there is a question about the cost of this, but let's leave it for later. So I would say backhaul is the important part. We have the local champions. I say plural because you need a small team of people to work in making community networks a success. But then you need the devices. You need training. You need the local community. But not only the training is not only for those who implement the community network, but we have seen in many places that it is also important to train the rest of the community on what connecting to the internet means. Because in some cases, the internet is seen as just one entity, but there are way more opportunities than just that one entity or that one thing you can do with the internet. So you need to also have a community that understands the opportunities that open up when you provide them with connectivity. And that requires training, that requires time. And then you need the devices. Devices in the form of not everyone can afford to have a computer. Not everyone can afford to have a smartphone. So people might get connectivity where they live, but they might not be able to afford devices to use that what they're getting. So you need a whole mix of everything. As you could see, Murambinda, for example, has started as an internet cafe, rather than a community network from the very beginning. And people still go there to connect from the internet cafe because they can use the devices they find there. So as getting to Murambinda, you see that there is a strong leadership, Joseph, guidance with very good guidance. You need backhaul, you need knowledge. You need devices in terms of connectivity, wireless, but also in terms of end user devices. You need a good mix of all this. And that is what then gives you a good product at the end. So maybe Joao wants to build on top of this.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Well, I completely agree with all your points. Well, it makes sense this is a complete overview of what is needed. As for partnerships, I would just like to add, for instance, Max highlighted very well the needs of the community networks and how we can support them. As for partnerships, I think it's important to mention as well that one of the challenges, as we discussed earlier, for community networks is the financial aspect as well. And while we don't have, for instance, a global effort to direct for universal service funds or other public available funds for community networks, they still require a way to reach out for funding at first. And in many places, this is a good partnership with local organizations or even national organizations that we're calling mass organizations. They are working with the smaller organizations or directly with the community to be able to help with those things that Max mentioned. So even gathering funding at first to kickstart the community network, to assessing if the community network has a good environment to work with. So for a policy environment, so if they have the right regulations in place so that they are not breaking any laws or breaking any regulations by existing. So these massive organizations are able to help them with that. And they are also able to support in assisting for the governance, for creating a governance model, and also creating supporting with the training that Max mentioned as well. So this is a good partnership, especially in areas in Africa. And we mentioned next year we will be launching a guide for mass organizations in Africa specifically that are able to assess this. And this is a good partnership we're seeing in the region and even globally, especially, for instance, in Latin America. Here in Brazil, I can talk about the case in the country. We have been working with several communities, and the communities that are most successful in Brazil are the ones who are working with these organizations to support them during the startup process.
Thank you. I would like just to remind our audience here that they can ask questions through the QA facilities or the chat in Zoom at any time. And I would like to thank Maher Ahmed for his note on Wi-Fi networks being one of the solutions, especially in developing countries, as well as this kind of networks contribution to access to the internet for people with disabilities and at rural areas. I want here to get back to Guillermo and see if Meta is interested in leveraging its reach in the region to promoting community networks, particularly with aspects that were mentioned by Joao and Max.
In terms of technology, absolutely. We are trying also to help in terms of supporting some of these networks, especially when they work with innovative technology, so that either we support the community itself or the vendors in terms of deploying these networks. So that happens already, and you can find some example of that if you go to Meta Connectivity. You will find out the kind of project that we're trying to push around the world. Another way that we can help sometimes is, I will mention a project which happened in Peru, which is called Internet Paraturtles. And what happened is we worked with a regulator to try to find different rules that would work for everyone to be able to connect these areas that are not the city center. And at the end of the day, we ended up partnering with Telefonica and the government to really try to bring connectivity to the rural area. So it's not per se a community network, but it's the same kind of philosophy of really trying to work with the government when it's needed, or help in terms of reaching out to structures which are larger scale, so that smaller community projects can really help. So we're definitely happy to help anytime we can, provide entry or better access to the government when it's needed. And that's one point where we will always be on the side of going to the capitals and explaining the role of community networks, making sure that these rules are in place on top of all the technology support behind it. I mean, I still noting that at the end of the day, it's a vendor that is vending and it's a community which is deploying. It won't be us, but we're definitely trying to help in terms of getting the regulatory framework in place and getting the conditions so that these community networks can flourish.
Thank you very much. That would be wonderful, and would greatly contribute to an enabling environment in the region. My question now is that we have two main aspects that were mentioned over and over whenever we talk with people about community networks. The first is the competition that some people see community networks, but well, basically competing with conventional networks and ISPs in wherever they work. And the second one is that some regulators and governments see that community networks are a way to bypass limitations and restrictions that are put on the network. So creating some sort of back channels of communication that are a way of the government control to the business. What do you think of these two aspects? How valid are they?
I may take the first one, which is on really the aspect of competition. I think we should really remember that many of these communities are not connected, and it's not for the lack of large-scale ISP or large-scale operator being placed. In every single country, there are large-scale ISP and operators. It's really that the condition under which these large operators or large ISP operate does not allow them to go and reach this last piece of the community. And it's in this condition that you really need to have a change in the rules. Just to give you a very practical example, if one of these community networks wants to deploy some kind of mobile technology, they won't be able to access the spectrum because the spectrum has been auctioned most of the time on a national basis. It makes sense to auction on a national basis for most of the large cities. But when you talk about these communities which are not connected at all, that's where it stops making sense. And that's where we need the regulators to really step in and provide clarity on in which area they do believe that this competition network, which is really useful and really helping in the large cities, is applying, and at which stage there are communities which are not connected where they need different rules. And I think what community networks need more than anything is really clarity from the government, clear rules, so they don't have to go and ask for a test license, because that is something which is really difficult for small players, but they have clear guidance from the regulators on what applies and what doesn't apply. I don't think they're asking for specific rules, special rules or special treatment. What they need is really clarity from the government.
Max, what do you think of what's your take on this aspect? Community networks portray competition for ISPs?
No, I fully agree with what Guillaume just said. It's we have a situation where a community is not receiving a service because there is no there's no incentive for the ISPs to bring it. And so why an ISP should feel threatened by some community member who decides to take action on a piece of on an area where these ISPs have had no action in before. So there is no reason these ISPs should feel threatened. and there is no competition happening at that point. Actually, you have to see it the other way around, because the community stepping up and needing backhaul, needing capacity to be brought there, might actually become an opportunity for the ISP to actually monetize in areas of the country where they wouldn't have monetized anyway. So in some cases, the ISPs should look at it the other way around and say, and think about what they can do to provide capacity, to provide backhaul to these communities, so that they would still generate some revenue from an area where they wouldn't be generating any, and doing it with the help of the local community. So we have to look at it in a different way.
Yes, and just to, I completely agree with what was said. And just to add to that example, when we were discussing the Murambinda story, for instance, it was only possible to have improved connectivity because they partnered with the one of the major ISPs in Zimbabwe, which is Tel1, for backhaul specifically. We have seen examples. We have worked with another community in Waimanalo, Hawaii, where they also partner with Hawaii Tel to be able to get backhaul. So this is exactly the issue. They are reaching the people that the regular service of the ISP was not able to, and also working together with the ISP to make sure that they have the proper connectivity. So in the end, it's a win-win situation rather than a competition. This is why we're calling it complementary access solution, because they're complementing the work that the ISPs are doing.
Great. Now, for the other aspect that we have been also hearing as one of the reasons why community networks are not supported or not very much encouraged in the region is that they may pose a security threat by providing I would say a channel of communication that is away from the government control. What do you think? Do you think that the community interest pose that sort of challenge or not?
I think this comes from the assumption that these networks are built to not to provide a service for the community, but just to provide a hideout for someone. And similarly to what I said for the competition issue, in most cases, this is not true. I mean, in almost all the cases, there might be very, very, very few exceptions, but as we've said multiple times, in any case, a community network has to buy capacity, has to buy backhaul from a local entity, and that is going to be a local ISP in most of the cases. And the local ISP is the entity that has to provide all the services that a regulated market has to provide in the sense of lawful interception, in the sense of blocking the required websites that need to be blocked because if the country doesn't allow certain services, or any other blocks required by the local authorities. So there is no reason to think that a community network would pose a threat in this sense, because similarly to all the other entities providing internet access, they get internet access from other licensed entities, national ISPs or local ISPs, which also on their side have to follow all the laws. They might not have, community networks might not have the same structure as a commercial organization, but they, in many cases, they just provide a service that comes from another entity that has all the structure and all the required services in place for the country where they operate.
Yes, and just to add to Max's point, I think, as he mentioned, we have very, very, very few examples with community networks that are unlawful. But one of the main issues that we want to highlight is that licensing community networks is a very interesting way to support solving that problem, because, well, a lot of the issues is that community networks sometimes, when they don't have a policy environment, a favorable regulatory policy environment, they're still trying it out, and as they are living on what they are able to do with the current policies. If they are recognized and they are able to have their own licenses regularly and be registered, this is a way to make sure that they have a lawful framework to exist on, and they can be working with the regulators and working with the government rather than despite it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe in the past, it may have been that if you take a telecom network, the content of the network is linked with the network itself. We're really moving into the internet. I don't think that anybody is controlling any internet by going in every single device. That happened at a much larger scale. So the best way for the government really to keep an eye on this network and be aware that they exist is to make it as easy as possible for this community network to interact with them. So welcome them, help them, and that will give you an overview of where they're deployed, the kind of usage that they have, and that will be a lot more helpful for the government to understand exactly what's happening in terms of internet usage in their country.
Thank you very much to all of you. These are great insights. I'm aware that we only have a few minutes left before moving to final remarks. If we had a potential champion in the audience today, where would you direct them to start?
Let me take this, but then I will use the opportunity to say you should talk to Joao. And let me explain why. For the last 2 years, I would have directed everyone to myself, and then Juan Peirano, who is following, I know, this panel. But starting, in 16 days, then we will hand it over to Joao as a colleague, as to be the project lead. But then also, Hannah is the person you can talk to in the region. And I see Nermin, who's also turned on her camera. Any one of us from Internet Society is a good starting point. Any one of us can then start the conversation internally to see what we can do to help. And we're always happy to help with guidance, to help with pointers. We have a training course we can point people to. That's free. It's going to be actually updated for next year. It's going to be even better than it is now. So talk to any one of us. And I see Nermin has her hand up, so I'll give her some space to talk now, because I've spoken already too much.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much, Max. And I just thought that out of the experience that we actually had with our colleagues from Yemen this year, I think starting a dialogue with ourselves as sort of experts in the field, if I may call us as such, would help you so much to understand where can you start in your own region or in your own country. The Yemen experience has taught us a lot of things, starting from how to think and how to organize yourselves internally, and what to search, and how to sort yourselves, and where to find or how to find the place or the venue or the village that you can start studying to establish a community network within. It's a journey that I cherish to have actually with my colleagues here from the Internet Society and even from Facebook as well. Guillaume has been one of our partners, actually, whom we have been having at different occasions. And I believe it's very, very useful to have such a discussion, even if the discussion will turn out into nothing. The experience of itself and the exercise of talking together will open for you many opportunities, I'm sure, and will address many challenges that you are facing. And maybe alone you are not going to find a solution, but together we can find something that can be useful, not specifically for community network per se, but in the connectivity and accessibility problems that you might be having in general. Thank you, and I'm sorry that I interrupted the discussion among the panel.
You are very welcome. That's why I gave you all my space, all the space I could.
Yes, you are very welcome, Nermeen, and thank you very much, Max. And keeping with the local culture, we will extend a couple of minutes for final remarks. Gaimo, would you like to say something?
Just extending what Nermeen said, community networks are really the way to bridge a digital gap. They can really make a change to your community. Feel free to reach out. There's really, we welcome any initiative, and we will try to do our best to help. And at least let's have a conversation and see whether we can direct you to the right partners. Sometimes it's going to be us, sometimes it's going to be someone else. But really, don't be shy and come and ask.
Thank you very much, Gaimo. Joao, any final conclusion?
Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, I would echo that. I think CNs have proven, community networks have proven to have help in bridging the digital divide globally. As Max mentioned, we are all open for anyone that wants to start building a community network and wants to have more support. We have a lot of materials on our website, internetsociety.org, and we can leave our emails. We're eager to work with you all to support building community networks, and we want to see a future where people are able to build their own networks without many challenges, and that we are able to bridge the digital divide. Thank you.
Thank you. Max, any final words?
No, I just would like to second what Joao just said. We are all here to help. We can point to examples either in the region, outside the region, and Nermeen mentioned the Yemeni CN, which is starting, and thanks to the work that Nermeen has done, thanks to the work that Hannah has done, we were helping from the back of the seat, back of the car here in this case. We will hopefully see a successful CN that we can use as an example in the region more and more. And yeah, this is just to close up. We're always available to help anyone.
Thank you very much, everyone. We had a great discussion today, and thanks to each of the panelists. I would like also to thank the organizers of the DCDF for allowing us the opportunity to talk today. And Fran, please reach out for any further discussions related to CNs. Thank you very much again, and enjoy the event.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you, everyone.
Under the slogan of shaping our digital future, the Arab International Digital Cooperation and Development Forum, DCDF, will bring together representatives and experts from Arab governments, the business sector, civil society, the technical community, academia, and international organizations. DCDF will be held virtually from 13 to 23 December 2021 by ESCO, LAS, ITU, UNCTAD, and UNDESA. Through almost 30 sessions over 8 days, you can participate in policy debate on priority issues in the fields of internet policies and digital development globally and in the Arab region. DCDF aims to align the Arab tracks of the World Summit on the Information Society and the Internet Governance Forum. to maximize opportunities for digital cooperation. Register now to join us in this journey from 13 to 23 December. Together, let's shape our digital future.